In the mysterious 20th century, in Kansas, a state located in the Midwestern United States, some notorious serial killers also emerged on this vast land. Their crimes filled people with endless terror because the methods they used against their victims were extremely cruel. However, what is most chilling is that some missing people never reappeared, not even their remains. This means that no one knows what kind of torture they suffered, nor where they were buried by the murderer. For the families of the victims, this unknown is the most painful torment. They understand that their loved ones have likely met with misfortune, but deep in their hearts, there is still a faint glimmer of hope that their relatives might still be alive. This feeling of hovering between despair and hope constantly cuts at their souls. On the morning of January 27, 1977, in Leavenworth, Kansas, 72-year-old Hazel Meeker was sitting on the sofa in her home. For her, every day now consisted of lying in a rocking chair, reading the newspaper, and watering her flowers, enjoying the life of an elderly person. Just as she was about to rest, a boy broke into her house. Upon hearing the door open, the elderly woman felt an unknown sense of panic. Upon closer inspection, she recognized her neighbor's son, 16-year-old Richard Anthony Grissom Jr. Meeker thought that perhaps the young boy had had a minor argument with his family and was looking for someone to talk to. In her impression, Richard was a very friendly, handsome, and intelligent child. However, she was unaware that the young man was secretly holding a railroad spike. Half an hour later, Richard left Meeker's house in a panic. He then broke into another house. Since the owner was not home, he carefully searched their rooms and took a handgun. Dozens of minutes later, Meeker's granddaughter visited her grandmother as usual. Upon opening the door, she found her grandmother lying on the ground with a pool of blood beneath her. Immediately, she contacted the police and reported what she had seen. An investigation was launched promptly. The investigators who arrived at the scene found a large number of disordered footprints near the house's entrance due to the snow. They followed the footprints to a trailer park, passing by a house that had been burglarized along the way, and then reached the railway tracks in the southern part of the town. Apparently, the perpetrator was trying to cover his tracks. After arriving at the trailer park, the investigators found Richard, who was trying to bury the handgun. Absolutely, they apprehended the person they believed to be the murderer. At the police station, the flustered Richard quickly confessed to the murder under police interrogation. 3 months passed quickly, and in April 1977, Richard was convicted in juvenile court and transferred to the Topeka Boys Industrial School. The purpose of this institution is to provide education and vocational training for boys under 16, helping them reform and reintegrate into society. 2 years later, in February 1979, Richard and 2 other teenagers escaped from there, but they were captured after only about a day on the run, during which they also broke into a house in Jefferson County. In 1980, after leaving the Topeka Boys Industrial School, Richard enrolled at Kansas State University. In September, he went to Manhattan, where he joined the track and field team. During practice, he earned the nickname Rockman because he almost fell every time he jumped. Due to his lack of running talent, Richard quit the track and field team after a month and took up squash, where he was regarded as a star player. In November 1982, a month before the final exams, Richard stole $190 from a resume service in Manhattan. 2 months later, he pleaded not guilty to the theft charge and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. After that, he drifted between Kansas City and Manhattan. In 1984, he stole a Mazda and was sentenced to serve time until June 1988, when he was paroled. In fact, Richard was an unexpected child born to an American soldier and a Korean woman during their time together. His biological parents directly sent him to an orphanage, where he stayed until 3 years later when Richard was adopted by an African-American couple and brought to Kansas. Over time, in the mid-1970s, they moved to Leavenworth. No one knows what happened during Richard's childhood, but some reports indicate that he was frequently abused by his adoptive father. In 1989, Richard began a relationship with Terry Renee Manis, a 25-year-old student at Butler Community College. On June 6, the two planned to start a romantic date. The next day, her neighbor found Manis lying naked on the floor of her apartment, covered in stab wounds. Later, the autopsy report revealed that her actual cause of death was strangulation. On June 8th, Richard leased a storage unit in southern Johnson County under the alias Randy Rodriguez. Over the past 2 years, Richard had become a house painter and maintenance worker, even securing contracts with large apartment complexes in the area. This gave him access to keys for hundreds of apartments. Then, in just over a week, 3 young women in Johnson County went missing. The first missing case was Joan Marie Butler, a 24-year-old who lived in Overland Park, Kansas, and worked for an advertising company. On June 18th, Butler told her family that she was going to visit a friend, but she never appeared in public again. On June 25th, Butler's rented car was found in an apartment complex, with a pool of blood inside. On June 26th, Teresa Brown and Christine Rush, both 22 years old, went missing. Brown was a cheerleader and prom queen from Camdenton High School in Missouri, working as a dental assistant and planning to become a dental hygienist. Rush was a high school graduate engaged in retail marketing. At the time, they lived in Trafalgar Square Apartments in Lenexa, Kansas. That day, Rush had taken a sick day for both herself and Brown, planning to throw a party because Brown was about to leave her. However, the next day, they were reported missing, just like Butler, and have not been seen since. While Butler was reported missing, investigators discovered that on the morning of the day after her disappearance, a man had withdrawn approximately $900 from her bank account. They immediately identified this mysterious man as a person of interest. Fortunately, he had not disguised himself in any way, so they easily found and identified him as 29-year-old Richard. However, they lacked direct evidence of kidnapping and could only charge him with theft. Since Richard had gone into hiding, the police had to issue a wanted alert to the public. In the meantime, friends of Brown and Rush saw the wanted notice and recognized Richard as the man who had attended their farewell party. Further investigation by the police revealed that on the day the two girls went missing, Richard had rented a second storage unit in Stanley with a woman claiming to be Brown. About a few hours later, bank surveillance cameras captured Rush withdrawing money from an ATM. In late June, law enforcement obtained a search warrant and searched Richard's Toyota vehicle, where they found the credit cards of Brown and Rush, as well as a 12-inch red knife. Additionally, witnesses living near Butler's apartment reported seeing a vehicle similar to Richard's parked outside their apartment building in the days following the disappearance. Police then searched Richard's two storage units and collected numerous hair strands from the floor, which were sent to the Johnson County Crime Laboratory for comparison. The results indicated that these hairs likely belonged to the missing women. Moreover, in the residence of Brown and Rush, the police found male DNA that matched Richard's DNA sample exactly. In early July, the FBI located Richard, who was in hiding in Texas, and dispatched 15 federal agents to arrest him. On July 7th, they conducted approximately 4.5 hours of surveillance at the American Airlines terminal in Dallas. At 9:45 a.m., they successfully spotted Richard and apprehended him. Richard was then taken to an interrogation room and subjected to an 8-hour interrogation by the FBI. During this time, he rarely answered questions and consistently requested to hire a lawyer. Investigations revealed that Richard had been staying at a motel in Corpus Christi during this period, so the police searched this residence but found no additional evidence. Although the whereabouts of the women were not discovered, the police had gathered sufficient evidence to determine that the 3 women had been killed, and therefore charged Richard with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of aggravated kidnapping, 4 counts of aggravated robbery, 2 counts of aggravated burglary, 1 count of burglary, and 1 count of theft. Richard was then detained in a prison in Dallas, and in November he was extradited back to Kansas. In March 1990, the judge reduced Richard's robbery charges from 4 counts of aggravated robbery to 4 counts of simple robbery. On March 14th, he pleaded not guilty to the charges. In October, Richard went on trial, with the defense insisting on his innocence while the prosecution accused him of killing the 3 women. As evidence, the prosecutor called a genetics expert who testified that the blood found in the car likely belonged to a child of Butler's parents, meaning it was Butler's blood. On November 4th, after 12 hours of deliberation, the jury found Richard guilty on all counts. Consequently, on November 20th, he was sentenced to 4 life imprisonment terms. The reason he was not sentenced to death was due to the timing of the 1990 Kansas gubernatorial election. Republican Governor Mike Hayden, seeking re-election, used this case to emphasize the necessity of reinstating the death penalty. He argued that if Richard had been sentenced to death for the 1977 murder, he would not have been able to kill the other 3 women. However, this sparked significant controversy, as most people believed Richard could not be sentenced to death since he was still a minor at the time. Moreover, Hayden lost the election and the death penalty was not reinstated. In October 1998, it was discovered that Richard had joined an internet pen pal group specifically for incarcerated individuals. The victims' families expressed their disappointment at allowing such websites. Tim Butler, brother of Joan Butler, wrote to the website operators stating, The monster Grissom forgot to mention his other hobbies, bludgeoning old ladies with railroad spikes and killing and torturing young women. As of 2025, Richard remains incarcerated and will not be eligible for parole until 2093. The whereabouts of the girls have still not been discovered, as Richard has refused to provide any information. He has also declined to offer details about the murder of Manus, for which he is also a primary suspect.